So it's very important that, we're proactive and that you realize that, you can accumulate wealth. Like you definitely can. You can. I've known people that, $600,000, $700,000, but I try not to give anyone, because if you're 60 years old, you want to get $1 million policy, you're not going to get it right. So I try to simple it and say defense income tax, because that's in essence, there's some.
What's going on, everybody's website here, the man, the voice, the fragrance. And we're here with a gentleman that, man, I would say he was definitely an inspiration for, or part of inspiration for some of the things I did early on, especially in my college career. Someone I've gotten to know over the past few years, and we reconnected recently. But it's someone who I'm proud to say my fellow king, my man, Malik Collins. Frank, how are you today? Actually, Malik, I never called you Frank before.
I know you
Malik, how are you, man?
You know what? I'm just blessed and highly favored, man. As far as being a king goes, guys like you that really were a little bit more mature than I was. Being a king is just about serving people. It's about always lifting people up. It's about putting on that face, just grinding it out and having faith. It's just, to me, that's what it's about. When I call everybody king, is a term of endearment. But I definitely appreciate the compliment. This is definitely empowering. So as far as that goes, I was a young man back then. We all were young back then.
Yeah, we all were young men back then. Yes, sir.
Yes, back to University of Maryland Eastern Shore, HBCU. We all know about the HBCU camaraderie throughout this country. That's what's really holding our community afloat, as far as I'm concerned. So,
and for everybody, just explain. Malik and I both went to the same university, University of Maryland Eastern Shore. He was the first Mr. UMES, and I was the fourth. So we have that lineage there, that bond there. He was still around by the time I became Mr. UMES and served in many respects as a mentor. He, as the first Mr. UMES, served as a very good example to myself and other brothers who, saw that position as something that we wanted to aspire to going forward. So that's why I say that inspiration, that mentorship. So I never forget that. But we both growing up, we've loved and lost and families and this and that. And one of the things that I wanted to bring Malik on to talk about was something that I didn't really start to think about until the past couple of years. I already always had something, but I never really thought about, okay, what happens if XYZ happen, or what happens with this happens? And I'm talking about insurance. And Malik is someone who is very knowledgeable about insurance. He sells insurance too. So, if after all is said and done, you want more questions, his information will be there as well. But I felt like this is a conversation that, especially as men with not just families, spouses, but just people in general we take care of, this is not a conversation we have often about the importance of life insurance specifically, and also the different types of life insurance as well. So I wanted to bring on an expert to talk about that, to really get an understanding of the pros and cons, as well as just why you should or shouldn't have it. But Malik, I'm going to ask you, how did you get into the insurance game?
I could always say as a young man, I was always ambitious. Somewhat of a risk taker, taking the calculated risk. My mentor, Willie Parker, actually contacted me on Facebook. Willie was like the big brother I never had. At the tail end of my marriage, first wife, I got involved. And what I really love about my company, Family First Life, is one of humility. I like the importance is I need to be around people with a high moral compass. So by getting in, it's just my ambitious nature. I've been with the same company for life insurance since 2020. Never worked for another company. Being as temperamental as I am, because I'm surprised. I'm thinking, back then y'all really looked up to me. I was like, man, I'm glad I ain't lead nobody astray. But it's that same ambition I had as a young man. And what I love about the business as a whole is that, one, the company I work with, Family First Life. I love the culture. Just went to a conference back earlier last month in Dallas, and it was just wonderful. I saw Shannon Sharp speak, met a lot of good, wholesome, down to earth people. So yeah, I got in because of my ambition. But personally, I sleep good at night, you know, um, because I know that this is something in our community that we tend to neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's something that, the old saying, we don't see people time. We need to be more proactive.
Right.
Life insurance is more than just paying for your final expenses. Life insurance is a mechanism to, in some ways, create generational wealth, but let's just simplify. It's a way to prevent income gaps. Not just when you transition, you could get. It just depends on the policies. But I got into business just on my ambition, and I'm always striving to, be successful in business. Back in my years, when I read different books about successful people. So that's kind of what got me into it. And I'm probably gonna do this until I retire. I'm 50 now, at least another, as long as I'm able to, think straight, I'll be selling life insurance. But it's more about educating you. It's really about where are you? What can I do to help you to prevent an income gap? Because in some cases, yes, it can generate wealth, but you may not qualify for that. So it's really based upon your age and your health. And no one's too young up to about 85 years old. So no one's really too young. Like honestly, I have both my kids are insured. My ex-wife, got her insurance. Mm-hmm. And even my girlfriend, whose house I'm over right now, she got insurance. So to me, it's, licensed in 7 states, Maryland, Virginia, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, Ohio, and New Mexico, right? So I'm actually licensed there. So even if you have relatives, and that's what's great about the business, especially now with technology.
Right.
So it's just a matter of, being humble, serving the community, working with a great IMO. I can't see myself working for another company for life insurance. It's just a great culture, great people all around. And I was in transition when I started. So just a lot of changes, with my family structure, and it happens. So
understood. Now, before I get into the different types, you started in 2020. So you got in, during the pandemic. Yes. Have you seen people's attitudes change toward life insurance since during pandemic and then post-pandemic?
I think so, but I think people, let's face it, who wants to think about their mortality?
True.
Who wants to think about dying? There was a surge. I think for me, people's attitude change, but my job is to educate people. Listen.
Right.
I not only do the life insurance, I don't have a Series 7 license, so, I won't advise you to invest on the stock market, nothing like that. I actually do safe money retirement, which is another way, say if you have an old 401k, you're protected from market loss with an annuity. So those are 3 phases, life insurance, mortgage protection, and safe money retirement, just to let you know what I specialize in. So I think that it has. But I still think people are hesitant because I think that they really don't want to think about that mortality. I mean, the question is, if you're married, if you're not, what are you going to do if that person doesn't come home anymore?
Right.
Well, I, as a father, I want to think about my kids passing away, but I have to be prepared, because, when you see people transition and they don't have coverage, and you see this GoFundMe accounts. We had a friend of ours who lost their son, and and I saw the GoFundMe. I felt like I was going to have an anxiety attack. But we don't, as parents, as men, our number one goal is to be the protector, right? But fathers, sometimes we don't want to think about it. I make sure that, I'm not just, I don't see myself as a salesman. I see myself as a field underwriter. So it's a matter of finding something that, 1, you qualify for based upon your age and your health.
Right.
2, what you get approved for, and last but not least, what you can afford. So that's and it's depending on what age you're in, depending on what you want to accomplish, that I tailor everything to you.
Right.
So that's kind of life insurance tailored to you, because it's really about you. It's about you, your family, like your family first. Like the company, the IMO that I work for. That's what it's really about, and it's really about being proactive. Life insurance is a mechanism to be proactive to prevent an income gap.
Right.
Yes, you can accumulate wealth, but when you're talking to people who in their 60s and they have to get a financial product, you're not going to talk to them about accumulating wealth. Life insurance prevents income gaps because I don't want to lead anyone astray. So that's in essence what it does. So
okay. Now I'm not as familiar, but I always hear term and whole life insurance, what first are those the only types of life insurance you can get? And then what's the difference between the two?
Okay, a term policy is, I would recommend that for someone younger. Okay, now with a term, it's mainly three types, right? And even within that, they have a lot. I'm gonna keep it real simple. A term policy is a policy set for a certain term. If you're in your 20s, which most
Mhm.
people in their 20s, you don't think about dying. You just, what do I need that for? You want to get a term for the most amount that you can pay and for the biggest face amount. It can be go everywhere from 10 years to up to 35 years. Okay. Now with a whole life, just like the name, and it's with a whole life, it's a policy that's going to last for your whole life. Generally speaking, the premium is going to stay the same. With a
Okay.
term and just very generic, at the end of the term, the premium could go up, right? So now this, I can go even any further than that. With a whole life, just like the name, it's good for your whole life. So you will have like a set payment. It does accumulate cash. All right.
Okay.
Now another product that's very popular, it's the universal, which is kind of like a hybrid. Whereas with universal, the index universal policy is a combination between a life insurance, like a whole life policy, and almost like a savings account, where it has an index based upon it would be like, say, the stock market, S&P 500. But your money's not invested, but you could actually put money in there. You could accumulate cash, etc. So those are the main three. Just to recap, you have the term, which is set for a term.
Okay.
You have the whole life, which is like the name implies, good for your whole life, and then you have a universal life policy. You also have a product, we like to say final expense. So say, for example, you're older, I'm 50, you're 60, and you don't qualify for a whole life, but you say you need 15 to 20,000 or 25,000 for a final expense. That's
Right.
similar to a whole life in that you won't have the opportunity to accumulate the cash value, but you'll get coverage. With the index universal life policy, you have the flexibility to literally, if you have a whole life, you get an index universal life, you could accumulate cash value. And so it's very, my company gives me the freedom to help you on many different channels. So.
Okay. Yeah. That the end of life. I mean, that first of all, I didn't know anything like that existed, but I'm glad something like that does exist because I've much like you, I've seen too many people who ended up passing away, and then you see this GoFundMe, and I've seen that recently for just people that are adjacent to me who lost parents, and clearly there wasn't any sort of life insurance or anything to that nature where they are trying to raise money to properly bury their parents, and this is like several occasions over the past couple months, and it's horrifying to think that you don't, as a person, I'm thinking I would never want to like get to the point where, oh, my kids have to fit the bill for, however, to take care of me, that nothing's available to them. And I would never want my kids to have to go through that. Kids,
Right.
whatever. But it's just one of those things where it's a difficult situation. And it's one of the things, like you said, we don't think about it. We don't think about it, or we don't have that forward plan. And that's one of those things that changed with me a couple years ago when I really sat down and thought about it. I was like, I really need to do this, because if I don't come home one day, much the way you phrased it, what's going to happen to everybody here? What's going to
Right.
happen to where they're living?
Right.
What's going to happen after I'm gone? Sort of thing. So I really had to think about that seriously. And again, like you said, that protect and provide, like that's exactly where that mentality came from. If something happens, I'm going to go now. And I have, through my current employment, I have life insurance that's part of what they gave me. So I've never thought about that. I know that's like tied to my retirement. That has actually increased since I started uh, 12 years ago or so. But I know
Yes.
that's
That's right.
but I know that's not enough to take care of everything here. That's a meager amount of money compared to what it would take, say, if I didn't come home tomorrow. What it would take to make sure everything is taken care of here.
Right.
So I just have to think about that, and I think it's probably hard. And let's go back to say single men. I don't think that is not an idea or concept I think most of us thought about as single men, but I think that it's something we really should start to think about, because you talk about that wealth builder possibly. That's an avenue I've heard people talk about, especially with uh, the whole and probably the universal as well, as far as taking cash out and using it to do whatever and things of that nature. But really becoming educated about the benefits or even just the rationales of having life insurance. I think it's really important.
Right. Well, see, here's the thing. It's, I mainly talk about the main types, but even within the term policy, again, I say income gap. There's some term policies. If you get a mortgage, you can get cash back. Of course, it depends on what you qualify for.
Right.
Like our life insurance is, a lot of these Walt Disney, a lot of these people kept their business afloat through life insurance. Right. This is something people have been doing for years. We're just finding out about it.
Mm-hmm.
We're, as African Americans, we're in the information, so we have access to information that we've never had before.
Right.
A couple generations ago, there were not a lot of guys like me to sell life insurance. Like,
right.
I don't take this for granted. And so it's very important that, we're proactive and that you realize that, you can accumulate wealth. Like, you definitely can. You can. I've known people that, $600,000-700,000. But I try not to give anyone, because if you're 60 years old, you want to get $1 million policy, you're not going to get it, right? So I try to simple it and say prevents income gaps, because that's, in essence, there's some term, and if you see my videos on TikTok, we talk about the riders, the income gaps. If you get sick, if something happens, you can use a part of that policy, so that's, but again, that just depends on what the individual qualifies for. So it's really a matter of, I try not to sell anyone a pipe dream. I try to be as transparent as I can. I simplify and I say preventing an income gap, because in essence, that's what it does. If you get sick, you may not create generational wealth, but it definitely will prevent an income gap, because if you tell us a 60-year-old, you won't qualify for $1 million policy. I mean, or if you do, the premium will be higher. So it's a matter of, creating an income gap. And I like to simplify it. But yeah, it's great. It's a great industry. I think with social media like this is just wonderful. You don't have to worry about renting a hotel. You don't have to worry about paying. It's great with technology, how we're able to educate each other just through technology. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's why I wanted to have you on, because I thought this was a very good topic to educate on, because it's not something we talk about at all, and we really need to, as men, as also in the African American community, it's not a conversation that I think many of us have, and frankly, many of us weren't taught about as well.
Right.
I think now, even with my family, I don't know so much about my dad, and I should ask him, but I know my mom always brings it up as far as insurance and where everything is, if something happens and that sort of thing. But I just know even with us, it's, while there was insurance available when, loved ones have passed away, it was never enough, and things had to be done to make sure they were buried. And it's interesting because I'm thinking more so like grandparents, great grandparents, they were very proactive as far as making sure arrangements were met or available once,
right.
When they expired. But things increased after they passed. So there were things the family had to do just to, chip a little bit in, or insurance policies took forever to cash out. But it's just one of those things where, one, we're not taught. So that's why I want to have this conversation. Two, we need to really think about long term. And I think
our legacy, like
the
people we leave behind, like, the more I realize that, there's less ego and it's more, okay, the impact we have. You talk about the impact when we were young men. I'm sitting there scratching my head like, man, I had them people fooled. I'm just joking. But anyway, just but that's important, especially when you start having families and you start thinking about, something would have happened. what am I teaching my kids? I teach my kids not to make the same financial mistakes I made.
Right.
My father, very stressed education, but he just wasn't as financially savvy. In our community, the focal point is, like, we have access to this information. Are people really going to start to take it seriously? And I still think to this day, people that respond, and it's just like, they keep putting it off. And I've had that happen. My colleagues, someone will die, and then they call, and it's like, it's really nothing we can do, or they get sick and they won't qualify. And it's a matter of, there's no better time than now to get coverage, because you're only as healthy as you are right now. Tomorrow you may not be as healthy as you are, or you're a day older, or that's it's basically based upon, in a nutshell, it's based upon your age, it's based upon your health, and then also based upon your capacity to pay. When you have someone die on you, literally, she got a policy. I felt bad because I should have said, you cannot afford this. You need to come down. And she died, and the policy lapsed. And I almost had an anxiety attack. I felt like someone punched me in the stomach, but luckily she had another policy. Right. So that's something I take very seriously. So I know as an agent, it's a matter, I'm trained on what can you afford, and get everybody covered. I mean, let's face it, we don't want to think about our kids.
No.
We don't. But the reality is, there's some policies that actually that you can get a kid policy. You could pay them for X amount of time, and then after they have a policy on them. You have to think about it. You have to make sure everyone's covered. You have to make sure that like I said, I'm covered. My ex-wife, she's the mother of my kids. My kids are covered. And it's just for me, I just wish I would have got involved in the business 15, 20 years ago.
Understood.
I really don't focus on how lucrative. I focus on just, like you said, being the king, being a servant. It's just really about, where are you and what can I do to help you prevent an income gap? And it's just a matter of finding what your comfort level and what is it that you want to accomplish. And that's kind of how I see it as a vehicle. It can be a wealth building mechanism, but sometimes building wealth is, or, what if you have like an index universal life policy, and as you get older, you'll be able to take advantage of that, from the index universal life policy. So as far as the cash accumulation, instead of taking out a loan or credit card, you can tap into the universal life policy, pay yourself back. There's so much creativity involved in this industry. So that's something to consider.
Okay, definitely. Now, Malik, I'm not going to hold you long because I know you're busy, but let everybody know where they can find you to find out more information and possibly contact you as well.
Okay, I'm pretty easy to find. I have a page, Life Insurance Tailored to You. You can definitely contact me through Facebook, also TikTok. I'm on TikTok. If you want to call me, you can feel free to call me. I'll give you my cell phone number. Okay, it's 443-629-1668. As I stated earlier, I'm licensed in 7 states. Feel free to call me, and it's just a matter of what can I do for you? What can I do to help you fill any type of income gaps? And just help you plan ahead. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Now, all that should have flashed down below your screen. If not, all the details will be in the links below in the description. Malik, thank you again, brother. Appreciate seeing you. You guys, Webster Style, we out.